Question?
Yes.
How is Tilton being paid back?
I believe Tilton went with the service that Mr. Albee was referring to, that they put the money up front and that they are overseeing it, and it's producing heat at a lesser cost.
So it's generating.
That's my understanding.
I don't remember that.
Generating funding.
It's returning money. They are the sole owner of the system, and I don't believe that they had to bond to get into that arrangement.
Yeah, I'm not clear on how they funded it. They spent several $1 million in building and establishing. That just went in a couple of years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we toured it. We toured it maybe a month or so ago.
I don't remember hearing that.
If we could move. Next question, would the federal grant have paid any more of the install price if the boiler was housed in the new nursing home? Now, I've heard from Chip Albee that it might have caused issues if it had been housed there with the overall cost. Is there anything else that you might add to that?
No, other than, you know, it would have cost more to put it in the new building because of the square footage.
If you
in regards to whether it goes in the old nursing home or the new nursing home, it was cheaper to go in the old nursing home.
But if I could remind you of the point that was just brought in by the consultant, that putting up a standalone boiler building probably would be in the area of $100 a square foot, which I believe is about the same number that they're using as a rehab number. So purely on a cost per square foot, and if you used a number of $270 a square foot, you'd be correct. My point is that there were other factors there that should have played in. That's a decision made by somebody else. Yes.
Just to clarify the cost of putting the boiler in the new nursing home, and I wasn't sure that became a little bit cloudy, but the point was made that if that had been done, the cost would have been mingled in with the cost of the entire cost of the new nursing home, whatever hadn't been completed at that time, and the Davis-Bacon rules would have applied, so there would have been somewhat more of a cost factor.
They would have cost you an upcharge of at least $1 million, probably more like $2 million.
Thank you. I thought I'd made that point clear. That's when I came back to that. Thank you, Representative Fleck. I apologize for not recognizing you. Has the boiler been delivered? Where is it at this point?
It's in Wisconsin. It's supposed to be delivered the 1st of February.
Some of the equipment is here, though, Mike.
Yeah, some of it's already here.
The augers are here, the blowers are here. There's quite a bit of compressors. There's some things in the
Thank you.
silencer.
Representative Monberger?
Yes, just for clarity, can we not have it shipped? Can we ask them not to ship it, but to keep it until we're ready for it?
To answer that question, it was supposed to be shipped back in September, and we delayed it and delayed it and delayed it, and he's running out of time. They really need to get it out of the facility out there. That's their problem, not ours. I realize that. And we didn't want to get it here, hire a crane to unload it, put it outside or storage, whatever. It's extra cost involved. We felt that if the room was ready, at least the floor ready and the cement slab, the doors there could be pushed in, the rest of it could be worked on.
Basically, all we have left is pour concrete. Now that the asbestos is out of there, that was completed last week, it's just pour a concrete pad, and that can be rigged and brought right in. Those can come out in the middle. There's no reason to have them outdoors.
Thank you. So we're to a point now that with the floor being done, that the boiler can be delivered, it can be set in place, which is what the agreement said that they were going to do anyways, was to install and put in place. Thank you. My next question then won't be necessary because you're looking to take delivery. I'd ask the size of the crated boiler, how much it costs, and if they're lifting, so there's no concerns there. Your boiler's ready to go. Okay. Yes.
Well, one question we haven't got to: how much does it weigh?
8,500 to 9,500 pounds. It's 5 foot. One of them is 5 foot wide, 8 foot tall, and 14 feet long.
great. It's ready to go and it's ready to be put in place, apparently, so. Anyone else have?
Two of them are put in. We have 2 furnaces going in,
Okay,
a big one and a smaller one.
all right.
Yeah.
Any other questions on pellet boiler at this point in time by the committee? Thank you. Anyone in the audience want to discuss this at this point before I move on to the building? Steve, if you would, please.
Yes,
Just state your name,
I'm looking
Steve.
at the grant of
Steve?
one.
I'm sorry, I don't know your last name, Steve.
Brown.
Thank you.
I'm looking at one of the grants, and agreement period. The agreement commences upon written notification from TRC and has a completion date of March 10, 2012. All funds must be expended by March 10, 2012. Does that create a problem?
Thank you. Commissioners?
We paid for the, for the piping and the furnaces. As you know, with federal grants, once that is done, then they will reimburse us. So it's all been done, and we should be getting a reimbursement of $400,000 before that date.
Thank
in
you.
March.
Good. But this we are apparently requires completion of the project by March 10th, and apparently we're 3 months out.
Okay. Thank you. The I believe what the commissioner is saying is that enough work's been done. I'm sure there's been a conversation that says that you're 50% done, 70% done, and an extension could be or has been applied for to extend that beyond that date if you
We
need
haven't applied for it, no, sir.
But it might make sense to have a conversation so that we weren't looking at an additional cost at another time or a less of funding. It would seem reasonable.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask Randy what his estimate of completion would be.
That's what we were saying, it's about 3 months. I think that's a good point. I think we should be in touch with Governor Shaheen, excuse me, Senator Shaheen's office, and just make sure they're aware of it. Because they've actually called us several times with questions on the Davis-Bacon, and they've been involved. So they should be made aware of that may slide by that a little bit. If they don't consider 100%, I mean, you're going to have, between your control work, your final balancing and controls, you're going to be tuning that beyond that date, so they should be aware of that. And I think they'd be understanding of that as well, because you've asked, obviously, a lot of questions regarding Davis-Bacon and how we process.
We tried to get a waiver on the Davis-Bacon, and Commissioner Solomon tried to do that, but
Not gonna happen.
it's not going to happen. The only thing that might happen, my understanding, is the difference between Davis-Bacon in the Boston area and Davis-Bacon up in this area. What that amounts to, I don't know.
Thank you. Representative McCarthy?
Yeah, I'd like to bring up a couple of things that, according to what I've read here, are included. $19,600 worth, all to be installed and operating: a touchscreen boiler control system, GSM alarm system, GSM alarm system access to computers, and a UPS battery backup system, which can run for short periods of power interruption. We're aware of all of that, right? I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
All included.
Yep.
Thank you. Before we leave from here, I'd like to just ask Commissioner whether it'd be appropriate for you or through Barnett, Page and Stone. As of late, there was some conversation and some concerns on the costing now that it's become evident to the commissioners and evident to everyone else that installed does not mean hooked up to the boiler and ready to go. I still cannot even begin to believe that's not part of the process. But in light of that, I know that the commissioners opened up the process and went out again and asked if there was anyone that had interest in doing that. And it's my understanding, well, if I could ask this question first. Has Bonnet, Page and Stone been installed any boiler to this size and to this significance prior to this installation?
They have been involved with the engineer that designed the system.
Thank you. My question is, has Bonnet, Page and Stone ever installed a boiler of this size or this type previous to this?
I don't know.
We personally have not put in a pellet system like this. We put in some smaller systems, and then Charlie from Biomass, installation and the hookup of it is General County Heating, is mechanical. They have. All the various suppliers and subs were reviewed and approved by Doug McGill, who's the county's engineer. Doug was very actively involved in this whole process from the beginning through the design.
If I could just, to the point of the question was, the answer is no.
Correct.
Thank you. And on another note, may I ask?
Actually, Randy, I think you're wrong. I think you have. The boilers that you installed at the new nursing home,
He's talking about a pellet
BTUs
system.
worth.
As far as the pellet system, if you're talking oil-fired, gas-fired, anything else but pellet, we've done hundreds of them all over the state. We've worked in facilities up to 250,000 square feet. So
Much larger.
much larger.
Thank you.
Specifically pellet is what he's talking about, I assume.
Thank you. And I'll finish and I'll come back to Representative Berger. The commissioners last Monday held a special meeting to award the contract for the pellet boiler installation to Bonnet, Page and Stone last Monday.
Correct.
And I believe one of the commissioners' questions at that point, who didn't vote in favor of it at that point, asked why the decision wasn't held till Wednesday at the regular meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember right from what I saw of the meeting on Wednesday there was actually an individual here that was expressing wanting to move forward with asking what the process was on the bid.
Mm-hmm.
Is that indeed what happened?
That's correct.
Thank you.
When I asked him if he had ever installed a commercial one, he said no. He's done homeowners because he quickly said, this 3 months waiting time is crazy. I can put it in 2 weeks.
I fully understand that, and
Okay.
I followed your whole conversation. My point was
Yep.
that this company may not have installed a pellet boiler of this size. They had installed pellet boilers, and that Bonnet, Page and Stone, which was moved on Monday to move forward, had not installed. It's a decision of the commissioners. I'm just asking
Yep.
on the timing, and it seemed ironic that someone on Wednesday, which is all that the commissioners had asked for, someone to come forward with some information all of a sudden shows up
Yep.
2 days
Yep.
after the bid.
Yep.
It seemed rather ironic to Mark.
If I could try to answer that question, yes, we put it out for bid. Bonnet, Page and Stone was the only bidder. One of the representatives, Representative Babson, who was at our commissioners meeting, said that we ought to put it out for rebid, which we did, and he said it ought to go into the Dodge report, which it did, and we still didn't get any bids on it. When I asked the individual who was here on Wednesday whether he gets the Dodge report, and he said something to the effect that his partner either doesn't believe in it or doesn't get it or is not interested in it. So that's what happened.
Yep.
So it went out to bid.
I fully understand that.
And it was supposed to be in by the end of the day. We should have put a time limit on it on the Wednesday because we would have voted on it at that time. But because we didn't put a time on it, we couldn't vote on it Wednesday, so we did it on Monday.
Does the Board of Commissioners have, as a habit, meeting on other days than Wednesday to do that sort of activity?
We have had, I believe, in the past 1 or 2.
Okay.
That was different.
Thank you. Okay, any other, and I don't want to go here beyond this point not saying. I am not making any despairing comment about Bonnet, Page and Stone, none whatsoever. They have a tremendous track record. They've done us great service in the past. My point is on how ironic it was, if I could. Anyone else have any questions on Representative Burke? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
that's quite all right. I'm not sure that I comprehend this concept of having the pellet boiler hooked up to the gas furnace. I don't understand how all of that works, and that seems to be a large portion of this $375,000. You know, it would appear to me, right, wrong, or indifferent, because I don't know, I'm not a heating engineer, that you could in fact basically have 2 separate systems. if one isn't working, you flip the switch and the other one works, or vice versa. And I'm just trying to come to grips with this whole interconnection that supposedly absolutely has to be done and the cost associated with it.
Thank you. I'll go with Bob first.
Well, for simplicity,
Okay, good.
you have a hot water heating system. Forget the fuel source, you have a hot water heating system. That's what heats the building, is a combination of hot water and hot air. The hot water heats the hot air and you have heat. Now, where the pellet and propane comes into play is what heats that water. You can have 3, 4, you can have a dozen different fuel sources if you want. They have chosen to have 2 fuel sources, one being propane, one being wood pellets. Whatever boilers are called upon are going to be the boilers that are going to heat up that water. Simple as that. And pellets are going to heat it up at a little better than 40% less money than propane would be.
Is that sufficient, Representative?
You're right, the connection is in the 315,000.
And a lot of that money is because it's automated. If you could just throw a switch, you could save a lot of money. But it's an all automated system, obviously, that senses and controls that and decides which boiler and which fuel source is heating the building at that given time.
These wood pellet boilers are going to heat the buildings, combined, both buildings, on all but the very coldest days of the year, when the propane might have to come in and help out a little bit.
Thank you. But in the summertime, when it's less efficient to run the boiler, the pellets, are we running pellets in the summer for domestic hot water or propane?
At the new building, yes. At the new
Okay.
building, we'll be able to heat our domestic hot water with the wood pellet boilers.
Small one.
Representative, further question?
So,
Whatever demand.
I guess
Excuse me?
Whatever
So-
the demand is.
So then my question becomes, going back to the $155,000 that we're looking for gas, should we not be able to significantly reduce that? Since it's only going to be on the coldest days that you would need the propane?
We're hoping to do that.
That's the ultimate benefit, should be,
Yeah.
just to save.
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
Okay, so our goal should become reality and we should reduce that for the budget.
Well,
Okay.
At some point.
at some point, yes.
Thank you.
Essentially, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Hang on, please.
Thank you very much. On the floor plan, we just went and saw the old, the room that is the old storage room that the boilers are going to be going into.
Right.
And then there's the boiler room across the hall.
Yep.
Now, both of the boilers, the new boilers are going into the old storage
Yep.
room. The boiler room across the hall, how does that fit in? Because I'm just a little confused about that.
We're going to pipe the heat from the pellet boilers across the hall so that that's going to heat the old building. And the pellet boilers, you saw the connection that comes to the new nursing home
Right.
out the other side.
Oh,
So that's the reason.
So the heat to the old nursing home can't come from those boilers, it must be piped to another boiler system.
Yeah,
Well,
right?
yes and no.
That's why I'm
Again,
confused.
it's a hot water heating system that's in the old nursing home. Whatever heats up that water is what we're deciding on, what you guys are deciding on. That heat from the pellet boilers is simply going to be injected into the hot water heating system of the old building. It's going to be injected into the hot water heating system of the new building.
Right.
It's going to be injected into the main boiler piping that runs around the building.
Further question, Representative?
So the boiler room has a boiler,
Yes.
and that boiler will be working also. So there would be two boilers.
Only as
working.
needed.
That's a propane boiler.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And the automation of the system is going to call it's going to call the wood pellet boilers first. And if for some reason, 20 below and the wind's howling, it may call in the propane boilers to help out.
All right, thank you very much.
Before I go to Representative Merrill, so the pellet boiler's in the first room when I walked in, the big open room that's there now. So the only thing that's happening between that point over to the boiler that's in the existing building on the other side of the hall is a hot water pipe and sensors going from there over, and then some sort of conversion module over in the with the old boiler, so that it recognizes it, calls for it, sends it over.
That's all part of the control package.
Correct. So there's not a huge excavation happening there.
Well, there's going to be a lot of work in the ceiling getting that piping over. You get some pretty significant piping.
Most of it's overhead.
Yeah, okay. I understand that, but
Power, we've got to go to the electrical room for power, integrate the piping, the hot water piping from both boiler rooms, new building and old, and then various controls to make that work, which will be housed in the new boiler room.
yeah, no, I understand that. I don't have an issue with that. All right, Representative Merrill?
Yeah, this is,
But excuse me, but there's no $300,000 worth of expense in that part. What sort of money's tying in between the two boilers? Is that 50, 60,000, 100,000?
I don't have the breakdown, but the low bids that we had from mechanical are, I mean, you've got, just in systems, you've got over a few hundred grand.
A few $100,000 to tie in the old building to the new system. That's all I'm looking at. How much more cost is it?
Yeah, it's not really broken out that way, but mechanically and electrically, you're looking at $230 million, and it's substantial. You know, all of the work combined. Everything from smokestacks to piping, controls, all the controls to make the two buildings integrate. You've got low voltage controls and so forth to make that all happen.
Okay, maybe I'm asking the question wrong. If the new boiler is sitting in the old building,
Correct.
okay, and that boiler is working, that boiler works, you know, interacting with the propane system in the new nursing home. So if it can supply there, it's going there. But to tie, what I'm looking at is what additional is it costing us then to heat the old building that has a heating source in it? And how much is it costing us to tie in that old building to that new system? That's all I'm looking for.
I didn't understand it.
And that can't be a couple $100,000.
Yeah, I don't know that stuff in my head. Right. I'd have to.
What you're suggesting is that the payback may not be worth it.
For tying in the old building.
For tying in the old building, because that system is there, it's working fine, and there's really no need to do that, because we're keeping the heat at 55 and...
Right.
That's my point I'm looking at. Representative Merrill?
yeah, maybe oversimplification, but I think what I'm hearing is that the bulk of the cost is in the automation and of making this thing judge, you know, which boiler works and which doesn't. And you've indicated that the propane will only be needed to use a few days a year. If that's true, and there are always people around here, couldn't that be done manually?
No.
Well, no, I don't know.
We run two shifts. Maintenance runs two shifts, not a third shift. There's not always somebody here.
But if I was going to go home at night and the weatherman said it's going to be down to 20 below tonight, could I turn that thing on before I went or not?
No, it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Well, what would happen if you did turn it on?
You need some kind of automation in there. It's just not a simple matter of flipping a switch and adjusting a thermostat. There's a lot of mathematical calculations based on outdoor air temperature, indoor air temperature, boiler water temperature. All those things are put together to come up with an ultimate heating call.
I'm still not clear. We've got two heating systems. We've got one propane one now, which will handle the old building, and we've got the pellet one, which will handle the old building and the new building.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, when it gets real cold, we're going to need the additional propane one to handle, along with the pellet, to handle the new building, I guess, is what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't understand why you can't turn them both on when you need it.
You want to maximize efficiency, or just you want to let it run wild?
Well, that depends on how much money I'm using by doing that, as opposed to the 300.
You're going to have a control package no matter how you look at it. So the addition of integrating the old building into it is not going to be that much of a difference. If you're talking nickels and pennies of money that you would save by taking the old building out of the picture. You're not talking dollars. And the payback you'd eventually get.
Yeah, because you've already paid for the infrastructure.
Yeah, that's right. The infrastructure is already there. To extend it into the new building is a no-brainer. You know.
Okay. Thank
you.
You
buy 3 tires or you buy 4 tires for your car. You buy the 4th one. That's a no-brainer.
Excuse me, Mark.
Excuse me. Before we go there. Number one, Bob, I think you're underestimating your powers. I think you could do that. I think you could run that switch, and I think in the back of your head you know what the temperature is outside. My question that I'm looking for is just what it's costing us to marry the old building into the new system. That's what I'm looking for, and if we could possibly see that, that's all. If it's a matter of 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, I don't think it becomes a matter, but it seems in part of this conversation it sounded like a much higher number.
I would say that's realistic, just based, I don't know that number because I don't have it broken out from the subcontractors, but that sounds reasonable, Mark, because the infrastructure's purchased, right? You've got all the equipment, it is just really the piping routing over to that boiler. So I think your numbers are, it's not a six-figure number, for example.
It's scary when Mark's estimations can agree with you.
Yeah, not at all.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on the pellet boiler, specifically on this? Steve, you want a quick question?
Yes, I just wanted, the first bid that went out, it's been repeatedly reported that it only went out to 5 specific companies, one of them being Bonner, Page and Stone. I've asked numerous times where the commissioners came up with the other 4 company names. Then it was stated it went back out to rebid, the Dodge report. It was in the paper for 1 week. And then they had the special meeting 44 hours prior to the next scheduled meeting. I would also request that the document that I just handed Representative McCarthy, because that one sentence I read, it goes on to specifically state what is included. So if Representative McCarthy could go on and read that, the rest of that paragraph, or I'd be happy to, but it specifically states what the original projected cost by the architect firm would include in the installation, everything else.
Thank you. While Representative McCarthy's looking for that, and I believe that number's already been mentioned, but Representative McCarthy wants to look there. I believe how bid specifications are put out and how many they have are directed to the commissioners how that has to be done, and I would assume that they followed the protocol that they were charged to do.
But how did they get the other 4 names?
I don't know that. We'll come back. Go ahead, Representative McCarthy.
Yes, in answer to Mr. Brown's request, the EGA architects has estimated the cost will be $500,000 to include the necessary renovations to the building, the installation of the boilers, the connection of the new heating system to the heat distribution of the existing building, as well as the connection to be made to the new nursing home facility. All of that is included in the $500,000 cost.
Thank you.
Mark, if I may, just a quick one?
If it relates to that, yes, you may.
Absolutely relates to that. I think you need to be careful what we cherry pick for information, because as we go through it, there was an extensive 2-year process we went through. And I don't know if Jerry created those numbers or where they came from, but when this process started, it was a single pellet boiler. And as the process evolved with the engineering, the design, and everybody's input, the 2 pellet boiler system came around, as you've heard, because of swing seasons, the advantage of heating hot water only, and that sort of thing. So the system grew and got more complicated because of the benefits it could provide. So there's a series of different numbers, but they're not always the same system that you're looking at. It's not just a pellet system. It's what type of pellet system. Is it chip, is it pellet, and how many boilers? There was a lot of different varieties looked at and a lot of different scenarios reviewed.
Thank you. I think the point that this subcommittee may have struggled with is if the number was originally at $500,000 and that was for building repair, that was for furnace in place that would take care of this, and all of those numbers, and if a building committee made a decision on $500,000 and down the road that criteria changed, then then it's hard to say how enthusiastic, after all the numbers were made, how that building committee would have voted. I'm sorry, ma'am, there's a question in the back.
Yeah, Maria Gonzalez with EGA Architects. Just so everybody understands, those numbers were put together by our mechanical engineer, did a lot of work in looking at this system specifically to be able to speak to the numbers were required in order to apply for the grant. So they were done very early on. They were very conceptual numbers to get an idea of what the final cost would be, to see if the grant, if the grant didn't come through, then there was no project. So those numbers were put together specifically just in order to apply for the grant.
Thank you. I guess if I could, while I have you there, and knowing that the number is 700